Hey everyone, Selman here from Wynn. On today's video, we'll be going over the pros and cons of Rate of Perceived Exertion. This is the second video out of a 4-part video series where we're deep diving into RPE and how it can help with your training. Make sure to check out part 1, which I'll link to right here. So today we're going to simply be talking about the pros and the cons of RPE training and why you want to include it in your training system and why you might not want to include it in your training system. So the first pro is also going to be the main reason why we're going to want to include RPE into our training is to help auto-regulate stress. Like I previously mentioned in the first video, stress is going to be affecting every part of our lives, and that every part of our life is going to be affecting our training in some degree or another. Now, our body can't really tell the difference between a stressful day at work or getting chased by a lion for that matter. Biologically, stress is stress, and we only have so many stress units that we can use up before our body starts to show some detrimental signs from that stress. And whether that be short-term acute stress, like a road rage incident, or long-term, slower, more long-term stress, like financial hardship that's going to take several years to get through, it's going to affect our training no matter how we look at it. And really, introducing RPE is going to help you mitigate those factors from the other part of your life and help account for that when you're entering into the gym and hopefully try to make the most out of that training session. So this brings us to the second pro of using RPE, because on the flip side of that is that it allows us to take advantage of good days. There are some days where everything seems to align. It feels like someone's turned off the gravity by like 25% in the gym. As soon as you step in there, everything feels super light, everything's going through the roof, nothing feels heavy. On those days, you don't want to really stick to what was been prescribed in your program, because you want to take advantage of those days where there might have been low stress, something's really clicking with the training, the body's made some good adaptations at that particular point in time. And rather than, say, leaving gains on the table because we're holding ourselves back because this number is written in the training program, we can take advantage of when we're feeling great and really push that weight a little bit more, or push out those reps and volumes and get a little bit more volumes or weight, whichever what the case may be. So for example, today's training program is going to be a single at RPE 8. Our target weight for the day is going to be 315 pounds. We squat 310 pounds and find that to be an RPE 7. So we know that 5 pounds is probably not going to be enough to hit that RPE 8. Maybe we load it up to 325 pounds, see how that feels. And if that still feels like an RPE, say 7.5, maybe we load up to 335. Or if that hits us at RPE 8, then it's good. It allows us to kind of ratchet up training depending on how we're feeling. So the next pro of using RPE is that it will help to increase our self-autonomy and self-control over training programs. And while this might sound a little nuanced or like irrelevant, over the long term, the more control we have over a situation, especially something like training, it's really going to help us stick to it a lot more, because we're in control of where we're going to go and we're able to decide what the next route's going to be. And that, just over the long run, while subtle and small, it will have a major effect in the long term, just from the mental side of things. The next pro is going to be we can utilize RPE for rating session RPEs, and this will allow us a little bit more of a systematic framework to track progress. You can use it also to track progress weight to weight, week to week, using those different weights. So hypothetically, if we're doing a single at 8 and the goal is 315, this week it was RPE 8, but then the next week, that exact same weight, that exact same single, feels like an RPE 9. Now we know something's happening here. Why did the same weight that we hit last week at RPE 8 feel like an RPE 9 this week? There might be a whole host of reasons for why that is, but we need to look and just investigate further as to why that's happening, and might give you some insight into the rest of that training. And having that same framework for the session RPEs, we can see if we're heading towards the need for a deload week, if you're more of a reactive deload person, or if we're seeing progress shoot through the roof, maybe we can drive up all of those session RPEs from the previous in the upcoming weeks based on what the previous weeks were, to help really take advantage of some of those adaptations we've been getting. So the next pro is just going to be, you don't have to know your 1 rep max to create, to follow a training program. A lot of training programs out there will use percentage of 1 rep max, whether that be actual 1 rep max that you've tested either in the gym or at a competition, or an estimated 1 rep max based on what you previously lifted using algorithms. So if you've done 10 sets at 315, you plug that into the calculator, it'll give you an estimated 1 rep max of what you can hypothetically lift. The reason that RPE has an advantage over percentage of 1 rep max is that your 1 rep max isn't the 1 rep max every single day of training. Your ability to exert strength is going to vary day to day, regardless of stress. And even when we look at it from a training perspective, a lot of training for powerlifting, you're peaking up to that meet day. So you're doing certain things to help elevate your strength levels for one given day. So that one given day, you don't necessarily want to base all of your training for the next 18 weeks based on one day that happened 4 months ago. For those of you that don't necessarily compete or test your 1 rep max that often, again, another pro, because a calculator that's estimating your 1 rep max may or may not be that accurate, but using RPE that day is going to be more accurate than that because it's a more reflective feedback mechanism on your efforts for that day. Finally, it's going to create common language between you and a training coach or a training partner. That way we both know RPE 7 means we have 3 more reps left that we can do. It helps us to communicate better when we're trying to set weights for the day, for today's session or next week's session. If you're training with somebody else, you both know that this is what an RPE 8 means. That way we can help and push each other. And now we move on to the cons. I'm obviously a little bit biased towards using RPE, so I'll try and give these as much fair light as I possibly can. So the first con is that it can take a while to get accurate measurement of RPE. If you're first starting to use RPE, or if you haven't used it before, the study suggests it takes around 3 weeks to get somewhat accurate about gauging RPE. And even still, there are other studies that show that even people that have had a significant training history tend to underestimate RPE. So there is that factor when using this as a training guide. It might not be that accurate. It might take a while to do that. So my retort for that would be, for the first month of using or implementing RPE, don't use it to make training decisions. Stick to your training program and simply add RPE for the practice of gauging RPE for yourself. But this does lead us to the biggest con, or the biggest objection to using RPE, is that some argue that it allows for trainees to sandbag their training. It gives you an excuse to not train as hard as you possibly could because you're not training 99% of your 1 rep max each and every week. Because that is a pretty valid counter argument to using RPE. If you were the type of person that was going to sandbag training, I don't think RPE is going to encourage that. It's just simply going to be part of your actions anyway. And finally, the RPE starts to get inaccurate when you get to really lower weights and really high reps. So as I mentioned in video 1, RPEs below 6 are generally useless pieces of information. You don't really need them. And if you're doing some sort of Metcon or like high rep workout, RPE is going to be inaccurate again. So if I'm doing like 100 reps at a 135, my RPE is going to be meaningless at that point. What's the difference between the 30th rep and the 31st rep? It's going to, that splitting the hairs there is going to get a lot more inaccurate, especially when you're looking at, there are some inaccuracies that exist at the lower reps. Once we start getting to higher reps, that error is just going to increase by a lot. So hopefully there was a somewhat even perspective as to the pros and the cons of RPE training. You obviously know where my bias lies. Is that to use RPE in your training, because I use it personally. I think it's a very helpful tool. But again, the price of admission for using RPE is quite low in my opinion. So I think there's no harm in, you might not want to base all of your training decisions on RPE, but at least include it in your data gathering and your training log so that you have extra insight into how your training is progressing. So stay tuned for video 3, where we talk about when and how you should incorporate RPE into your training. This has been someone from Wynn Strength, and remember, a better life through strength. So the biggest pro